As the years went by, my anger at the police system grew more intense. When Bert left, Pierre was assigned a marvelous guard called Barry, more friend than policeman, who came everywhere with us. He made the system tolerable. Just. But all too soon he left to be replaced by a competent, unimaginative hulk of a man, who by the end of our Middle Eastern trip I hated so much I could have killed him. If he stays with us, I'm off, I told Pierre in Rome. Pierre was appalled. But he has another 3 years to serve. To which I said, well, it's him or me. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Tia Denise, and today we're going to keep going in the Margaret Trudeau book. So last time we read, she has gone from 0 to 60. Before it was like, oh, Pierre, my older husband, who's just showing me the ways of the world. You know, sometimes it's hard with all this silly protocol, gag, oh, yuck. But we have these 3 great boys, and we have this really awesome country house. And so at the end of the day, I'm just happy to be here. I know it's hard with the protocol, but I'll do my best, and I'll just be a good little soldier for Canada. She's over it now. I think one of the real big problems came when she helped him in his campaign, and when he was reelected as prime minister, she didn't feel like she received her due, that she had really influenced the trajectory of his campaign and the way he carried himself on that campaign, and then when he inevitably won because of her redirection, nobody called her to say thank you, and it really bothered her. Now, I could poo-poo her and say, girl, please, at least your husband won. Isn't that what you wanted? But if you felt like your efforts had really helped him, even all the while people were chirping in his ear and in yours that you had failed ideas, but then in the end, that's really what helped, you would want people to recognize that you hadn't been so dumb after all. Okay. Well, so I get where she's coming from, but I just think that an adult would have to let that go. But no, in the typical bratty Margaret way, she's decided to just let this infest. And now she's, believing these lies about Pierre that just, there's nothing to substantiate these claims. The biggest data point of this and the most evidence we have of this kind of festering internal fantasy she has about him being against her and wanting her to fail is when they were in Argentina in the last chapter. She had designed this idea that she wanted to honor the president's wife by singing this song to her that she had made up. She'd seen the president's wife in the slums interacting with the kids in this daycare program that she'd been involved with. And Margaret saw it, thought it was like really great that this wonderful woman, unlike all of her contemporaries, was getting down and playing with the kids in the dirt and stuff. And after seeing this, she was so touched she wanted to write a song. And she says that she had planned on singing this song at an intimate dinner that was planned for Pierre and herself and the president and his wife at their home. And that she was going to sing this song of gratitude, this song of blessing over the president's wife. Well, then she says that the plans were completely changed, that suddenly, instead of this private dinner, they're having this massive, massive banquet. And everyone was wearing crowns and tiaras and, pins and brooches and military medals. And it was one of the fanciest things she'd ever been to. Yet she wants you to believe that suddenly this gigantic dinner was sort of just spun out of thin air, that it had never been on her schedule. BS, okay? You don't just suddenly have a major dinner like this. How did people know to show up? It was just like this sudden spur of the moment. Grab your tiara, don't forget your medals. Let's go. I'm not buying it, okay? So that was the first thing that I was like, okay, Margaret. And she says that suddenly the private dinner they were going to have was totally changed, and now there's this massive banquet. But the plan she'd already decided on it. And then she says that Pierre pushed her to go ahead and sing this song that she'd come up with, after the dinner. And she just stood up in her place and she just sort of sang this little song about, I watch with my eyes, my loving eyes, all that you do for the children or whatever. Okay, so it was a super embarrassing scene, but you just have to ask yourself, well, nobody knew you were going to do it. So why did you feel compelled at that moment to go through with the plan that you are now vastly uncomfortable with? But the part of the story that is important for us is that she claims that she thinks that Pierre did this, pushed her to do it to make a fool of her. That he had this sort of twisted scheme that he would make her look dumb. that her freewheeling sort of hippie-ish, I want to be the next Joan Baez moment, he used that in her character to humiliate her in front of others. When has he ever shown that before? And she then said, well, I'd taken a massive dose of belladonna for stomach cramps, and so my inhibitions were just zero. And so probably if I hadn't taken the belladonna, I would have had the wherewithal not to do it. But between that and malicious Pierre, she was just done for. But then, to cap off this curious tale, she tells us that a couple nights later, they end up having the intimate dinner that she had discussed earlier. So she initially tells us that there had been an intimate dinner planned. Then, oh my gosh, lo and behold, a huge banquet. I guess no intimate dinner. And then a couple days later, the intimate dinner. I don't think the schedule changed. I think you just didn't either read your schedule right or now you're trying to change the tale. I think that she was secure enough in the idea that this song was really pretty awesome. And I think she wanted to perform it. And when she saw that it wasn't taken well, then she re-engineered a narrative in which her kindness, she'd just been a victim of her own kindness, that she just wanted so much to bless the president's wife with this song that she wasn't even able to see straight. And that, damn it, can't anybody understand you just wanting to write a song and sing it to someone? It's like, who doesn't see somebody do something that's a blessing and then just like want to write a song and sing it over them? I mean, that's normal, right? But nobody understood her. Everybody wanted to think the worst of her. And so now it just very much felt like a re-engineered story. Then she goes back on the way home. She goes to the back of the plane to meet with the press, sings them the song, and then is like really indignant that they kind of like don't get it, and she goes right into the lion's den. And when they don't understand her plight and her feelings about things, those press agents have always been against me. Why did you sing the song again? It wasn't well received the first time. Like, let's just pretend it didn't happen, So that's what I'm saying to you. The whole tone of this section of the book in which she's trying to explain to us how things are not going well. It just feels like so much. It just feels like so much deception. It feels like she's telling parts of the story, retracting parts of the story, twisting things, trying to convince us that this is the reality, when it just feels like, no, you just feel like somebody who's telling me a tale of woe. But the whole time I'm thinking, I bet if I asked the other people there, I'd get a completely different story. Anyway, let's keep going in our readings today. This one is entitled False Protection. No amount of careful schooling, no amount of anxious warnings by Pierre could ever really have prepared me for the role of Prime Minister's wife. Being only 22 was in many ways a help, with the protocol, the clothes, the publicity, but in other ways it was a disaster. In any case, I hadn't wanted to listen to advice, and when the regime was upon me, it was far too late to do anything about it. Had it not been for Pierre's policy of keeping me taboo from the rest of the world, I might have learned far quicker what I was up against. As it was, the isolation left me curiously vulnerable, ignorant, and so undefended. From the day I became Mrs. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, a glass panel was gently lowered into place around me. Like a patient in a mental hospital who is no longer considered able to make decisions and who cannot be exposed to a harsh light. The result was that for 5 years I lived in cotton wool, struggling to grow up, to shape my own life, uncertain about whom exactly I was fighting against, but increasingly convinced that this artificial life was slowly crushing me to death. With so much civility around, whom to attack? With so much comfort, how dare I complain? On March 3rd, 1971, I was an ordinary, averagely intelligent and well-educated Canadian girl who smoked a bit of grass and had for years lived an uneventful, if perfectly responsible life. Overnight, I was turned into a child, a quirky, spoiled, rebellious child who must be humored, yet kept in place. Where once I had opened my own front door, got into a car, and driven to see friends, now I had the door opened for me by a changing parade of butlers and maids, was not allowed to drive, and could see approved friends only by appointment, and then closely guarded. Where once I had picked up my mail from the hall table, called my friends, and wandered in the kitchen to have a snack, now all my letters were opened and screened, my friends contacted by my secretary, and I was rarely brave enough to invade the kitchen with its chef and assistant cook to dig around for something to nibble on. Nowhere did the restrictions on my life bite harder than oversecurity. It was a word I came to hate. For 5 years, whenever I left 24 Sussex, I took 2 policemen with me. They stood behind me in shops, they dogged me along the street, They sat at the next table when I was lunching with friends. They hung about at the door when I was in a boutique buying clothes. They even cycled along behind me when I was out on my bicycle. Okay, that sounds annoying to always have people following you all the time, sure. But I just feel like at this point she's entrenched in having a bad attitude, because listen to the way she describes this next situation. The worst of it was that they changed all the time. Whenever I decided to leave the house, I had to call up the security office, wait 15 minutes for my escort to show up, climb into the Pontiac or Chevrolet at the front door, only to find myself confronted by 2 total strangers. Where to, ma'am? Sometimes courteous, sometimes cheery, always a little disdainful. And once I told them my wishes, I had to sit there listening as it went over their car radio. Mrs. Trudeau is going to such and such a shop. Then she's going downtown to pay a call on so-and-so. On the way back, we shall be stopping for 15 minutes to pick up such and such. It certainly takes the spontaneity out of a morning's outing. Of all the things to whine and complain about, that your life should be protected should be the last thing that you think you have the right to complain about. I just wanted to go downtown. She's planning on going downtown. She obviously knew what she was planning on doing. She was able to tell them what she was going to do. But because they decided to tell the plan to others, it just takes the spontaneity out of everything. Well, if you get downtown and you decide you want to do something else, you're the boss. You can say, okay, I actually don't need to stop at that shop. Let's go home. They're perfectly capable of radioing whoever they needed to radio to say, hey, we have a change in plans. After a while, I defended myself by not giving them advance information of my movements, because I found that if I was foolish enough to tell them in the morning that in the afternoon I would be going to a certain shop, by the time I got there, it would have been visited and checked out by a police patrol. So as I walked in the door, struggling for what anonymity I could get, everyone was alerted and waiting for my arrival, and little groups of people had collected by the street door. Then I really started playing games. I wouldn't tell my 2 guardian angels where I was going, even once I was in the car. I'd be the flighty woman, always changing my mind, one minute saying, let's go to the market, and the next, oh no, I think I'll try this boutique instead. But I couldn't win. The police tried to make it clear that they were guarding me, but I always felt that I was simply under surveillance, a prisoner. Indeed I was. There was no getting away from it. There was always someone watching me, always someone on guard. I soon found that I wasn't the only Prime Minister's wife to hate the security. Stories about different police forces and brushes with security men became a favorite topic of conversation at the wives' lunches and tea parties. I began storing up tales that made my own life sound like a picnic. I just want to say this real quick. Having a husband who is Secret Service, I find it really disdainful how often I hear, I find it disdainful how many times I hear stories about people who are unkind to the Secret Service, or in this case, the police, for doing their job. Do you think that they want to spend all their life watching you live yours? It's a disagreeable job, I think. It's not what I would want. And they don't, standing outside your door to protect you, standing, outside a shop while they wait for you to get your shopping done, standing on a golf course while somebody plays golf, sitting outside of people's apartment doors on a folding chair all night long. Do you think that that is something that, it's bothersome to me that she would act like these people have a personal vendetta. It's a job to do, and they do it. Like, these guys didn't all just decide to converge on you just because you're so hot. They just don't want to be away from you. Like, the attitude is always like, oh my gosh, it's so annoying that they're here again. Well, it's their job. When Nancy Kissinger visited Ottawa, she kept the lunch party I gave for her in tears of laughter over stories about what it was like sharing her small Georgetown house in Washington with a patrol of Secret Servicemen. She told me how she couldn't open her bedroom window without getting a key from one of the security men downstairs to disconnect the entire alarm system. Her guards patrolled not only outside the house, in the street, but inside as well. You have to imagine, she explained, a very small townhouse with small, neat rooms and lots of priceless, fragile furniture, and dozens of enormous, clumsy policemen with great beefy arms and huge feet stomping about. I can tell you right now that Nancy Kissinger is lying to you. That's not what they do. And she told that story because she was getting gales of laughter. But that's not what the Secret Servicemen are doing. They're not coming into your house banging up all your things. They're not even allowed to talk to you. If they have any reason to come into your home, they come in quietly and they quietly move about. They're not just banging your stuff around. And quite frankly, they're not all these big beefy guys. You wouldn't even know half of them were Secret Service agents. Like, this is so much bullshit, I can't even stand it. Nancy even had to put up with a man outside her bedroom door so that if she felt like roaring with laughter or crying or putting her hair in curlers or going to fetch a book, she always bumped into someone skulking about in the passages and felt their critical presence all around her like vigilant ghosts. She said that once it made her so angry she got dressed, stormed out of the front door, slammed it, and refused her policeman's offer to climb into their car, and marched off down the street. Even here she was defeated. The policeman jumped into their car and followed her 20 paces in low gear, grinding along the narrow Georgetown roads. All the women had their own stories to tell, and most of them shared my fantasy about running away, escaping, breaking free. Only Mary Wilson, the wife of Britain's Prime Minister, said crossly that she didn't have a policeman at all, and that she wished she had because she would have found his help invaluable while shopping. She can't have realized how lucky she was. And if I felt persecuted, what about the restrictions royalty had to put up with? Theirs was a life sentence of constant police surveillance. Unless you're Prince Harry, who would love some of that surveillance. Inside Canada, the Royal Mounted Police provided the security team to guard Pierre and myself. 28 men on a system of shifts, but the number increased as the babies came. Then a special squad of 9, purely for their safety, was formed. There had to be someone on call always for each child, though later, when Justin and Sasha went to the same school, they shared a bodyguard. We had a second team of security men, full-time, stationed up at Harrington Lake, though we soon found that the men on duty up there tended to treat the assignment like a holiday, using our boat, snarling up the fishing tackle, swimming freely in the lake. Hard as we tried to, neither Pierre nor I could quite bear the way our possessions were somehow taken over, like public property, so Pierre asked that the men wear their uniforms. In Ottawa, they're all plain clothes, because he felt it less likely that they would spend their days canoeing if they were in their distinctive khaki jackets and black pants. Well, it sounds like her staff was just really terrible. No trained Secret Service agent would ever behave in that way. So if she's frustrated, she's either lying to us and telling us a story that is absolutely ridiculous, because I cannot even imagine, in my wildest dreams, any Secret Service agent in the United States ever touching anything that belonged to the president and using it when he was on duty. I mean, he'd be fired so fast it would make his head spin. So to act like everybody was just like getting in their canoe and using their fishing gear and playing with their toys, it's like you are either lying or, my God, things are bad in the Canadian government that this is the way their agents would behave. When I had married Pierre, he had a bodyguard, a charming man called Bert Guillero, and he had once taken Bert snorkeling and only discovered, as the man clung frantically to the anchor of the boat, that he couldn't swim. Bert had forgotten or been too ashamed to mention it. Pierre's excellence in most sports caused the force something of a problem. We found, for instance, that we were always being assigned amateur skiers to accompany us to the mountains, so we spent wasted hours waiting for them to catch up with us. Pierre solved that by getting a specially trained skiing patrol. Never was our security more ridiculous or ill-equipped than when Pierre and I went on one of our early romantic canoe trips down the French River. We were with 2 close friends, Eric and Pam Morse. Eric was a great traveler, a historian of Canada's waterways. I had pressed for us to be accompanied by 2 young constables for my patrol, both good canoeists and likable fellows. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister of Canada cannot be guarded by mere constables, so we drew a stranger, high in rank and low in humor, and one of our own corporals. The day we set out was misty and gray. We flew by helicopter up into the wilds with our canoes, backpacks, and sleeping gear, ready for a 4-day trip down one of the most spectacular rivers in Ontario. 6 people, 3 canoes. We soon met with our first rapid. Eric and Pam took it first. Pierre and I followed. It was noisy and fast and frightening, but Pierre is a superb canoeist, and we had no trouble. Then came the policemen. Of course, they thought they could take their own path, and before a minute was up, they'd capsized in a bubbling pool with half our food and all of their own equipment, and the rest of the day had to be spent drying them out. When we finally came to move on, we found that their radio transmitter was out of order, so we made our way downstream with 2 soggy, mutinous policemen in far more danger than ourselves. The presence of these 2 policemen at our intimate fireside was far more irritating than the ubiquitous black flies, and much increased when their badly put-up tent collapsed in the middle of a downpour, like a scene out of Deliverance. One more canoeing incident with the police freed us forever from taking them with us on our trips. One sunny early summer's day, Pierre, Justin, and I went off for a lazy day's paddling and a picnic on a little river north of Harrington Lake. A police canoe accompanied us, and we organized a rendezvous with them for 4 p.m. 4 came and went, and there was no sign of the men. Finally, we got a call over the radio. They were further ahead, waiting for us. Unsuspecting, we continued up the river, and a couple of minutes later found ourselves caught up in fast, difficult rapids, the water churning around us. One moment we were even perched on a rock facing the wrong way. I kept my eyes shut, clung on to Justin, and trusted in Pierre. Then we heard a deep, menacing roar ahead. In a split second, Pierre got us to the side and heaved the canoe urgently out of the water. He walked ahead to look. There, just around the bend, was a huge rocky waterfall, which we certainly couldn't have survived. When the astonished police caught up with us, we discovered that they had been using the wrong maps. But by then it was 8 o'clock. Justin was howling and exhausted, and I swore that never again would we allow such idiots to endanger our lives. On our next trip down the Petawawa, we went on our own. It was a truly good, simple trip without irritation or danger. Okay, I'm not saying she's lying. I'm just saying I don't believe her. I think that this is a person who is given too much exaggeration. I know that nobody looks at Canada and imagines the militant forces that they have trained for the security of themselves or their prime minister. But I feel certain that, well, I don't know that anyone would turn to Canada for their secret forces and for their specially trained operatives. I would think that their force of policemen who have been given the job of protecting the prime minister would know how to read a map. I feel like any man would know how to put up a tent. I'm struggling to understand why they would send people on a ski trip with the prime minister and his wife who didn't know how to ski. In Canada, where I feel like there's probably quite a few skiers amongst the crew, it's not exactly like it is in a sport that they've ever heard of in Canada. I feel like there could have been 1 or 2 incidences that were probably not all that she would have liked. That's going to happen in any country with any Secret Service agent or policeman, however they describe their guards. But at least in America, our Secret Service agents have received training. And our Secret Service agents would not be called to do something with the president if they were incapable of doing it. Now, considering the events of last summer, they've received a bit of a bad name. And I could go into much detail about how that occurred, but it's not really my story to tell. So I won't. But all I'm saying is, in the event of a camping trip, if Secret Service agents were put on that trip, you better bet your ass they would know what they were doing, as far as the sports that were required of them. And I just really have my doubts that anybody would be on a trip with the Prime Minister in Canada and they would send someone who didn't know how to ski and the Prime Minister was continually waiting for them at the bottom of every slope. I don't believe it. Everything she tells me is just like, I mean, I don't know. This is a person who says she got to the official residence and there was literal holes in the carpet. You know, so are we supposed to believe that too? Everything she says is just so extremely ratty and unbelievable that it's just like, at this point, I feel like you're exaggerating. I feel like it could not be this bad, always. She said security at home was one thing, but when we went abroad, it was sometimes so intense as to be laughable. Tanya, my guardian angel in Moscow, followed me so closely that I couldn't even go to the washroom alone. That she was a guard as well as interpreter was made plain to me the day when I caught sight of a revolver in her handbag. Getting rid of her, even for a few minutes, led to some funny scenes. One day, Mrs. Gromyko had laid on a delicious tea of chocolate cake and strawberry shortcake, and a group of Russian wives and I were gathering around a table, talking in a stilted sort of way. For all my surreptitious pushing and shoving, Tanya was crouched close alongside me. Finally, Mrs. Gromyko had had enough. Politely, but extremely firmly, she marched Tanya off to the other side of the room and placed her with a plate of cakes in one corner. Then we settled down to a far more enjoyable and unguarded tea, with all the women questioning me closely about the West. Pat Nixon and I, so I later saw from a photograph, shared Tanya on our separate official visits to Russia. The Americans, I discovered, gave more protection than anyone. Staying once for a holiday with Pierre and Justin, then 18 months old, on a deserted island in Hawaii, I found that our tropical hut, even on all sides and with walls made of screens, was guarded by 4 men, one stationed at each corner of the house. They could not only hear every sound we made, but they could see us as well. It put an end to the romantic holiday. I found, too, that the burly American police could be singularly slow-thinking. One day we ventured out to a wild, secluded beach where we were alone except for a young hippie family with a little girl of Justin's age. The police soon made it plain that there was something very deviant about them. The wife actually bathed nude. The waves were enormous and the undertow a killer, and while I was by the water with Justin, the little girl, showing off to us, went too far into the waves and got swept off her feet. No one moved, so I plunged in after her and scooped her up in my arms, but then I too was swept off my feet. I shouted for help. It was Pierre, not the 6 strong American policemen, who came to my aid. At 24 Sussex, it was the police who laid down the rules of morality for the staff. They put a security curfew on the house. Friends had to be cleared if they wanted to visit, and even then they couldn't come after certain hours. If one of the visitors looked at all hippie, then the police had him or her blocked. When I discovered what these vetoes were doing to the social life of the staff, I objected, only to be told politely to mind my own business. Diane had a boyfriend, a young boy who wore his hair in a ponytail and had a police record for trafficking in marijuana. When they discovered this, the police decided to get him banned. They waited a couple of weeks, then filed a report that one night they had been walking around the house when they had smelled an unmistakable trace of grass coming from the staff windows. It had to be Diane. By some lucky coincidence, Diane kept a diary. It was discovered that the very night she was accused of having her boyfriend in, she had in fact been up in Harrington with the children. I made a great fuss, and that cooled their moralism for a while. The irony was that the sweet smell was more likely to have come from my room. Sweet smell? I don't think anybody would describe marijuana as smelling sweet. It smells like a skunk. Not many years after we married, in a mood of desperation about the life I was falling into, I had defied Pierre and gone back to the occasional joint. It wasn't much, and I took great care never to be caught. It wasn't long before I had my knuckles rapped. A nice young policeman rang our bell one day. I went down to see who it was. He handed me a little packet. "I brought some incense for you," he said, smiling. "Sometimes when I patrol the house I can smell it coming from the window, so I know you must like it." It was a warning, a friendly warning, but a warning all right. I took more care after that, on occasion after having to resort to shutting myself into cupboards for a quick smoke. That sounds like somebody with a problem, not somebody who's just sometimes likes to do it. I mean, if you're shutting yourself into cupboards because you just gotta smoke, we have problems. Like the stuffy protocol, I fought the formality of the police. I couldn't bear the way they would salute every time I came out, so I stopped that. The trouble was there was nothing to replace it, so I used to mumble, "Hi," as I went past, and they would just grin sheepishly. It wasn't very satisfactory. I also fought the way they were always there, even at the most intimate moments. Pierre, who got on fine with all of them, never noticed a thing, but I used to be deeply conscious of their feet crunching through the snow beneath our bedroom windows, and the crackling voices from their transistors often woke me from a deep sleep in the middle of the night. As the years went by, my anger at the police system grew more intense. When Bert left, Pierre was assigned a marvelous guard called Barry, more friend than policeman, who came everywhere with us. He made the system tolerable. Just. But all too soon he left to be replaced by a competent, unimaginative hulk of a man, who by the end of our Middle Eastern trip I hated so much I could have killed him. "If he stays with us, I'm off," I told Pierre in Rome. Pierre was appalled. "But he has another 3 years to serve." To which I said, "Well, it's him or me." It was the first of many incidents. One sunny summer's afternoon in Ottawa, I decided to pay a casual visit on my closest friend Nancy Pitfield, who lived just 2 blocks away down the street. A spirit of childish adventure overtook me. I wanted to just go right now, not sit around waiting for 20 minutes until my police patrol could be summoned to accompany me. Like a mischievous child, I crept to the window, pulled back the curtain a couple of inches, and peeped out to see where the policeman on guard was stationed. His bright red uniform and funny hat were clearly visible at the side door. I took off my sandals and tiptoed to the front door. Scarcely breathing, I opened it, crept out, and stealthily made my way down the drive. Once out of the gates, I started to run. It wasn't many seconds before I heard a clong, 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 puff, puff, puff behind me. I stopped, shrugged my shoulders, turned around. There, heaving and puffing, was a beefy, red-faced policeman, pounding as fast as he could down the street. Another day I lost my temper. It was midwinter, and snow was falling very gently on Ottawa, turning the dreary streets into a silent, magical world. I decided to take Sasha and Justin to a walk in the Governor General's compound across the road, an enormous empty park where I often took them. I bundled them into their parkas and set them in the pram. As I turned down the deserted path, the snowflakes falling and my spirits rising at the beauty of the scene, I became aware of a policeman at my heels. I pushed harder to get him further behind me. He hastened his pace. I pushed faster. Soon we were flying down the path like people possessed. Finally, red in the face, sweating, the silence shattered by the noise of my heartbeats and the steady pound of his feet, I whirled around. "Why don't you leave me alone?" The poor policeman flushed. "Don't take it out on a poor guy. He's only trying to do his job." "If you can't take it out sometime, somewhere, on someone, where does it all go, this rage? How do I get rid of it? I'm angry because no one ever leaves me alone. I'm always conscious that somebody's watching me." The policeman looked pained. "You're not under surveillance. You're being protected." "Oh, no, I'm not. I'm under surveillance." My feuds with the security became so frequent and so hostile that the day came when I decided to pay a visit to the assistant commissioner to discuss my security. Clearly, things couldn't go on as they were. Edward Willis, a nice, sympathetic man, tried to be understanding. "We just want to help you. Can you make any suggestions?" "Yes! First of all, don't assign any more creeps to my detail." "Creeps? What exactly, Mrs. Trudeau, is your definition of a creep?" "A creep is someone who is very heavy, quite unexceptionally heavy. He has his hand on his gun the whole time. He does not communicate. Either he chatters meaninglessly, or he's stony cold. He refuses to reach out and pick up a bag for me even if he sees I have 25 bags to carry. That's not his job. He's a bully and he pushes me around psychologically all the time. Everything he says to me reeks of the world I'm trying to avoid. Moralistic, censorious, riddled with formality. Can't you give me young men who have children of their own, who have ordinary wives, who aren't so super conscious of being big, tough policemen?" By now I'd gotten into my stride. It all came pouring out, the grievances and the miseries of my first years. "I don't change the police all the time. Give me time to get used to them. I feel my privacy invaded each time I have to face up to a different fellow at the wheel of my car. I don't want so many people to know every single thing I do." Assistant Commissioner Wells and I made a deal. He offered me Henry Kennedy, the best policeman he could think of, a nice, kindly man in his late 20s who was making a good career for himself in the force, who had spent time with us before as a young corporal and loved children. Henry would look after me. In return, I was to make no more trouble, no more unscheduled disappearances. I kept to my side of the bargain, and Henry stayed with us for 2 years, though he could have left as soon as he asked to. I came to depend on him more and more as a friend, to whom I would complain and bitch when things went wrong. In Henry's company, I could drop the pretense. I didn't have to be formal and polite. Can I just say that it feels like to me like she wanted like cute guys hanging around that noticed her and noticed her more than they noticed the job they had to do? That's what it feels like. Like, what does it matter if somebody, she's like, I want somebody who isn't heavy, exceptionally heavy, somebody who isn't always so formal, somebody who isn't over here being more moralistic and censorious. I want somebody who doesn't have his hand on his gun all the time. I want somebody who basically notices me and not the job he has to do. That's why she liked this Henry person, because she could drop the pretense and bitch to him, and he could just be her like chummy little friend who she hangs out with all day while Pierre's not there. To me, it would be hard. I get it would be hard to have a different guy at the helm every time she got in the car. But like, these people don't need to be your friends. Like, if they are literally just there for your protection. It just seems to me like she'd gotten into a mentality of anger and indignation, telling herself she was being surveilled, even though they kept telling her, you're not. These guys are hired because they don't care about you. In that they don't care about the gossip in your life. And so that's the kind of person you want. Like, if you don't want to be surveilled, believe me, they are not surveilling you. So for her to have developed this whole story that her life is like this police state and she's in this dystopian environment is just so much BS. But it is a different time. Maybe in the 1970s when she's describing this all going down, maybe the police treated her in a different way. Maybe the relationship between them is very different. Maybe they were objectionable people. Maybe they were these big fat idiots who just couldn't put one foot in front of the other and was waving a gun all the time in her face. I don't know. I mean, this is how she claims that it went down. I'm just saying that I don't believe it, because the level of incompetence and then just the general sense that these people were these blustering fools that were constantly getting in her way. Like, I feel like a lot of that is kind of her fault, because that's the way she chose to look at them. She chose to believe that they were always coming after her. She chose to believe that they, were intensely interested in what she was doing only so they could disdain it. I don't believe it. She goes on to describe this very intimate relationship that she's got with Henry. She says, when Misha was born, he got all dressed up in a white hospital robe, and while Pierre sat at one end of the corridor having intelligent conversations with the doctors, Henry marched me up and down to get the baby started. Henry's wife was having her first child in a couple of months, and he was as obsessed with the coming baby as I was. He wasn't quite prepared for the screams and yells from the delivery room, however, and when I emerged triumphant, proudly clutching a swaddled baby, I found him white and shaken. But it says much for our relationship that he was there in the first place. During my discussion with the assistant commissioner, he had also agreed on choosing policemen for the children who don't feel that it is degrading for them to run after little boys who have escaped their nannies, and don't see guarding the Prime Minister's children as a job fit for a babysitter. Pierre and I felt that we wanted friends for the boys, men who understood that they needed guarding but very discreetly, and that whatever happened to the children with their friends, the men must never interfere to defend them. The new team included a couple of women police. They have become friends now, not resentful strangers. The boys marvel at their guns, for Pierre forbids them any toy weapons. We have told them the security men wear them to shoot snakes. The day I discovered that all my oppressive security was nothing other than a myth, I was down in Jamaica with Pierre and his guard Barry. It was sunset, and Barry and I were drinking rum punches by the shore. There's nothing I like better than a rum punch, and Pierre wouldn't drink. And I said absent-mindedly, "Barry, is there anything that you think should be changed about our security?" "Well," he said, "if it was up to me, I'd have it legislated, written into law, so that there isn't always a tremendous element of doubt about it." "What element of doubt?" "Well, we have no way of ensuring that you'll be guarded the entire time." Truth suddenly hit me. "You mean to say that I don't have to have policemen all the time?" He looked uncomfortable. Well, of course you really should have them all the time, because you're always in danger from nuts, but it's not actually compulsory." Within 2 weeks, I had taken my driving test again and got a new license. Pierre bought me a car, and the day I picked it up, I waved goodbye forever to Henry. The feeling of freedom simply to be able to drive my own car down the street alone was unbelievable. It was better than freedom. It was anonymity. Big, burly men with short hair and guns slung bulkily around their waists under navy blue blazers are unmistakably police officers. No amount of pretending they weren't there changed that. Everywhere I went, people stared. "Who's that woman with those two officers?" "No more!" Pierre let me give up Henry on one condition, that I kept security men for the children. It was a small price to pay. The most delightful part of my newfound liberation was how much I rose in esteem in my children's eyes. For the first time, I was able to drive them about in my own car, just like everybody else's mother, with a security car behind. We celebrated by buying a cassette player and a number of children's tapes. It was also the beginning of remembering what it felt like to be spontaneous and free again. I started going out for long drives to visit parts of Ottawa, a city I had lived in for 5 years and knew nothing about. In some ways, it was the beginning of the end. Having tasted freedom, the sweet, beguiling smell of escape, how could I resist? Overnight, however, it also improved my relations with the entire security package that surrounded us. I became helpful, even obliging when security was really necessary, and I came to appreciate what it is they did for us. For instance, the day came when I visited my parents in Vancouver and heard that there was a killer on the loose who had read The Vertical Mosaic, a thriller about the Canadian establishment. After that, he had murdered 4 teenagers at a camping site and decided to make $2 million to visit Paris and buy a Rolls-Royce. He apparently was looking for a member of one of Vancouver's richest families to kidnap. I was grateful for my security men then, all right. Another day, a man was seen wandering around 24 Sussex with a shotgun, and I got a phone call from the office. Where were the children? He turned out to be a harmless fellow escaped from a mental institution. I figured that I could handle my own safety, but Pierre and the children needed protection. After all, the Canadian record is excellent. In all my years as Pierre's wife, I did not have one single frightening incident. Indeed, the only incidents that befell us were thefts, and those from visitors to the house rather than strangers. One night we gave a reception for about 100 people at 24 Sussex Drive, a very mixed party to celebrate the opening of a new academy. While handing around the drinks, Ruth, not one of our household maids, but a woman who often helped out in the diplomatic circuit, noticed a man slip a tiny Greek head, given us by the Shah of Iran, from the mantelpiece into his jacket pocket. She made her way to his side, jerked her tray so that a glass of whiskey poured over his sleeve, and in a flurry of apologies and excuses, whipped the jacket off his back and retreated into the kitchen to clean it. A few minutes later, still apologizing profusely, she was back to return the jacket, minus the Greek head. We weren't always so lucky. Not long after we married, Pierre gave me a gold fountain pen with my name engraved on it. After one political reception for the Liberal Association, the pen had vanished from beside the library phone. The security was one glass wall around me. The screening of my letters became another. As the years went by, the number of letters from total strangers, of love and friendship, though many, many more of hatred, multiplied many times. I came to see them as a terribly oppressive force on my life, a shattering condemnation of every move by people who had never set eyes on me. To feel hatred and criticized by strangers is a frightening sensation. In the days following our secret marriage, hundreds of letters poured into 24 Sussex. "Dear Mrs. Trudeau," most of them said, "congratulations. The Prime Minister needs a wife. Now all will be wonderful." Old ladies sent me recipes for cakes and patterns for sweaters. Well-wishers wrote about their own happy marriages. Young women told me of their successful lives with men old enough to be their fathers. I basked in the warmth of their approval. It didn't last long. 4 months after our marriage, the Queen came to Canada. Having given considerable thought to my dress, I went out to the airport in a big straw hat, a mid-calf length dress with a pattern of white daisies and brown edging, puffy sleeves, and a high neck. That was the time of the gale blowing at the airport when twice my straw hat danced off into the wind. And did I ever hear about it? "What a shocking dress to wear in which to receive the Queen," wrote legions of Canada's matrons. "Who do you think you are? A chorus girl?" The practical sent hints about hat pins, how to tether a straw hat in a gale. The snide cried shame. The busybody sent advice about what I should be wearing, a lime green dress in linen or silk with matching jacket and white accessories. This was the first taste of what was to come, a self-righteous feeling on the part of the great Canadian public that they owned me, that my taste ought to reflect theirs, and that when I fell out of line, I should be castigated. My question is, why did she open these letters? I mean, I don't care what you think what I wore. I'm the Prime Minister's wife. I'm the one that sits here, and I get to wear what I want to wear. And what she wore doesn't sound like it was bad. Who cares what all these busybodies have to say? I mean, who cares? All these people who want to correct you all the time, well, they're not the Prime Minister's wife, though they wish they were. So just throw, I would like throw these letters into the garbage unopened. I do not care. I mean, what do I just feel like to go through every single one of these letters of people who feel like they need to tell you something. Even people who are like, telling you like advice and stuff. Well, what good does it do me now? Like, thanks for the advice. The event's over. I can't go back and rewind it. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, just don't even care. I know it's nice that they took the time to write the letter. But if you know that it's destroying your peace of mind and you can't open those letters without anxiety or feeling like, it's very upsetting when somebody starts something out, "I really love this about you, but," and then spends the rest of the time. If you feel like every time you open a letter, it's going to be where you don't know what to expect, even when you think it's starting out good. Okay, this must be a good letter. And then it like turns into just rejection and you should have done this and let me criticize you up one side and on the other. If it's too scary to open these letters, if your peace cannot handle it, then just don't open the letters. And it seems like something you could have figured out fairly early on. If 4 months into the marriage, she's already receiving all this criticism and all this unwarranted advice, and she knew it was very upsetting to her, then just let somebody else open the mail and you just don't even bother. Have somebody else bring you the letters that you think are pertinent. But then other than that, who cares what Jane Doe in the middle of Canada has to say? So what? She thinks she didn't like your dress, you wore to see the Queen? Okay. Like, the world's going to keep spinning. The sun will still rise tomorrow. And if it's too upsetting to you, just don't read it. She says, "When I was pregnant, letters poured in by the sackful with handy hints about clothes, food, the way to stand and walk, how many hours to rest, what time to go to bed at night. I was Canada's most cosseted lady. One woman wrote to tell me that I must dress my baby in permutations of 3. 3 layers on top, vest, shirt, sweater, 3 layers on the bottom, diaper, pants, and trousers, like some Kabbalistic formula. Another said that I must on no account have the baby at home. The public curiosity and opinion went down to the very smallest detail. Among the well-wishers, there was more than a fair share of nuts. After Justin's birth, one woman wrote to say that his middle name must begin with an E. She suggested Emmanuel, because that way his initials J-E-T, Jet, would launch the new cosmic force into the Jet Age. A doctor, believing me to be giving him a bottle, wrote hastily to inquire whether I knew that milk was poisonous. From then on, with every event, every birthday, Christmas, or celebration, the mail shot up. The moment I did anything out of the ordinary, bang, another 200 letters. It soon held me back from the slightest display of ostentation or originality. Since I insisted on answering all except the real sickies by hand myself, it meant hours of work. When I was swamped, I got a little extra help from a girl in Pierre's office. This situation went on, worsening steadily until after the 1974 election, when Pierre suddenly realized how badly I needed secretarial help. It was then that I was given Marie-Helene Fox as my part-time assistant, and she took on a team of secretaries to whom we dictated the replies. It was a mixed blessing. For one thing, it became very easy for me to leave it all in her capable hands, with the result that when I did get to see some of the letters that went out in my name, I got furious and blamed her for tactlessness and formality and scrunched them all up. They solved that by having a machine with my signature. 2 machines to be exact, one formal, one girlish, so I didn't see anything anymore. This way, I missed all the hate letters that started to come in after some of my exploits on official tours. The few that got through, delivered by mistake to the front door, or caught up in my papers, were enough to give me a shock. Crazy, cruel letters written to hurt and destroy. But I also missed all the encouraging ones, the ones that told me to keep on fighting, that professed admiration for what I was trying to do. When I went into hospital for depression, the mailbag blew up like a balloon, 2,000 letters a month. By the same token, I missed the personal letters from old friends, people coming through Ottawa wanting to see me, and whom I didn't hear about until they had left. Screening took about a week. The screening was often arbitrary and absurd, more like censorship than protection. Prince Andrew wrote me a long letter which was opened, probably read, stapled together, and delivered casually weeks later, even though his name was clearly printed on the back. "Opened in error," said an unrepentant scrawl over his fine hand. When the checks and controls spread to the switchboard, so that friends were curtly told I wasn't at home and no message taken, I demanded and finally got my own telephone with a private number. But only when I left Pierre did the full horror of the situation dawn on me. My mailbag had increased 300% in my last year at 24 Sussex. At one point, I had 950 letters waiting to be answered. The day I walked out of the gates, there was no one to protect me any longer. The waves of hatred poured over me like a rough, vengeful sea, and I fled in horror from the monster I had unleashed. "You pot-smoking slut," wrote one man. "Canada is well rid of you." "We'll kill you if we can," wrote another. There were threats and taunts and sneers. I had released a genie of vitriol, and the poison spread all round me to everything I touched. "You were damn right to go," wrote a vitriolic woman. "It was about time you left that deviant scoundrel. More is the pity you didn't take the 3 little boys. You've left them in the hands of a commie." A tide of violent hatred was upon me. I ran from it as fast as I could. Well, that's the end of Sunday's read. I have mixed feelings about what we just read. Now, there's a part of me that wants to say that I really just don't get all of her fuss with the security. It's weird that we could have Harry out there begging for more security, and then we have people like her who are just disgusted by it and want to break free from it. To me, I feel like having security would be one of those things where you make it what you make it. If you don't like having all these people wandering around outside and then you just obsess about it and obsess about it and obsess about it, like, you can't make it different. This is the world you live in. So to just be so mad and indignant. But I also don't know why she's acting like this is brand new information that she could drive her own car. Even the Queen of England can drive her own car. I mean, when in the world has even the royal family not had the ability to drive themselves around when they wanted to? Now, I'm sure in the city, the Queen doesn't drive herself around, but if she's on her own property, she can drive her own car. And it just feels to me like she didn't ask any questions. She just sat around being really angry. And then when she'd hear a little tidbit like, "Oh, you don't actually have to have security all the time." Like, did she ever go and inquire? Must I have all this security? She just, flailed about and raged about and was bratty to everyone. But it just feels like she never wanted to do any legwork to make it different. And I'd be like, finally, I was able to get my own phone because the switchboard was never giving me my calls. Well, that should have been something she did day one. I want my own phone with my own number. But she spends years crying and screaming, and it's so hard and it's so difficult. The stuff with the mail, just don't open it. That is absurd that you, with a young mother, with all the things that she had to do, was with a mailbag of hundreds of letters a day trying to answer all these letters. Maybe it's different times, but I can't imagine any prime minister's wife or president's wife in this day and age sitting there at a computer trying to answer email from, a myriad of crazies. Your time is so much better spent doing something else. Get a secretary. And that's not like a new idea. This is why I barely believe what she's saying. Because how could Canada be so clunky? I don't think Canada's clunky. I don't think that your police force is out to lunch and can't manage to do anything. It's just a bunch of fat weirdos, bumping heads. I don't think that you guys had never heard of the idea of carpet on the floor of the executive house that wasn't full of holes. I do not think for a minute that your prime minister's wife was expected to spend all day long answering the letters of crazies. It's just like, how in the world is Margaret having this terrible, terrible time with the clunky house, the bad security, no advice, no one's ever telling her anything, no one ever gives her any kind of proper briefing. She's always just stumbling into these situations, making a fool of herself because nobody could bother to tell her which way to go. The way she paints Canada as just this backwoods place that can barely pull it together, I do not believe it. I know there's lots of Canadians who watch this program. As Canadians, are you offended by the way she depicts your government? By the way she sort of depicts it as this bumbling backwoods, no one's got it together, but they all want to, play tea party from time to time when the Queen comes in. I don't know what reality she's trying to paint for us, but I just feel like if we were to get anybody else's opinion of what was happening at this time, if we could get Pierre's opinion of what was happening at this time, anybody who was witness to this, I feel like we would get a completely different picture. She's not trying to write a glowing story of the way she behaved. She is admitting all the things we knew to be true about her inability to have any kind of guard over her mouth. She's always flying into rages. She's always doing something dumb, but she always has some kind of an excuse for why she was doing that. I would like to know from people who are really there, what was it really like to be around Margaret? She feels like she's very, very incapable of impulse control. And while she always seems like she has an excuse for it because everybody else was being so stupid all the time, what else was she supposed to do? I'd like to know what anybody else thought was happening. Was the police force really this incapable? Was she really expected to spend her entire day answering back critics and letters from all these nobodies? Was she really the first person to ever walk into that house and fix it up because it had just been so junky for so long? Did she really help Pierre to win that second election, or is that just her belief? Was that just what she used so that she could launch herself into this rebellion that, I tried to play the game and nobody appreciated my efforts, so I have to rebel now? I just do not find her a credible witness in her own defense. But do you? Do you think that this story was full of truthful, and do you think that today's readings were truthful and honest? I've had my questions about a lot of the things that she's told us, but for me, for today, I felt like all of this was a lot of over-exaggerated issues so that she could pad your sympathy and make sure that you understood that, she had to get away. Could you live like this? But I feel like it's an exaggeration in order to gain our pity. I do not believe today's reading is 100% accurate. What do you guys think? Do you guys know anything else about what it was to be a member of the government, a member of the establishment in the 1970s in Canada? And were there police force that was supposed to be watching them really this incapable? And would somebody in her station have been expected to answer every single letter that came through the house? That just seems like such a colossal waste of time. But maybe you guys know better than me. So let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. Talk to you guys later. Bye.